This photo you see was taken in San Francisco in 1957. The second guy on the left was the former president of South Vietnam, Diem. 6.5 years later, he was killed during a coup, supported by the US. After the coup, the US started to get deeply involved in Vietnam. However, they still did not have the reasons to be militarily involved in South Vietnam. Suppose the papers or the Congress asked the viable question of why they would need to provide a legitimate reason. That answer came in 1964 when the White House announced an attack on the US naval ship. However, this incident was due to the conduction of the South Vietnamese military by US general on the North Vietnamese islands. North Vietnamese fought back and had mistaken USS Maddox for a South Vietnamese vessel, and the war officially started. Wars are not conducted by men gathered around a table, but uttered from their comfortable chairs. But the call of duty needs men, and sometimes a lot more than anticipated. During the Vietnam War, to combat the military shortages, former Secretary of the Department of Defense, Robert McNamara, who served under Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, deployed a program that led to over 300,000 men, many of whom were not able to pass the basic tests of aptitude, coined as the Project 100,000, but it also had derogatory aliases such as McNamara's Morons or McNamara's Follies. In a secret White House tape, Johnson referred to them as the second-class fellows. Worthless, dummies, mug squat were other unsolicited names given to them in the rankings, and they were put into Tier 4 level, which means they were not suitable to be drafted. A typical Project 100,000 men were identified as Caucasian, with most of them being dropped out of high school. However, the number of Black and Latino soldiers were overrepresented, with over 40% of them being African Americans, with 65% of them from the South. Of those recruits, some of them had physical deficiencies, such as partial blindness, or they did not meet the physical standards in terms of height, physical shape, or weight. Also, some of the Project 100,000 included men with physiological issues. Because there was an urgency to find manpower, they were inducted into the Army by lowering the passing score. These recruits of Project 100,000 scored an average range of 10 to 15 on mathematics and 16 to 20 on verbal skills on the Armed Forces Qualifying Test, also known as AFQT. A score of 10 is the equivalent of a 5th grade education, and many recruits were considered borderline or mildly retarded. The soldiers in the program 100,000 were 3 times more likely to be killed, and were assigned 11 times more often than their peers. Yet, by Robert McNamara, they were promised a better future, a future to those that were struggling. Instead, the Army took those people, some of whom were not even capable of comprehending their situation, and sent them off to a country thousands of miles away to be used as an experimental factor. Some of the Project 100,000 men were not just a danger to themselves. With being around the equipment that could explode, they were also a danger to their fellow soldiers. Men need to count on other men in an environment where there is a high chance of losing their livelihoods. Resilience and emotional control are imperative for this to come true, aside from the physical training and aptitude of using weaponry. But unfortunately, some of these men were susceptible to drugs and alcohol, and some of them did not obey the rules, going AWOL. Moreover, a large portion of those men were discharged with lower than honorable. Upon returning to the homeland, they could not get a job because the recruiters did not fancy hiring soldiers with anything less than honorable discharge. As a result, those could not get the veterans' benefits, which included housing services, healthcare, employment, counseling. Consequently, some of them became homeless. If you guys want to learn more about this topic, I would suggest you actually go ahead and watch the podcast of Jocko Willink, number 315, where he reads the book McNamara's Folly, The Use of Low IQ Troops in the Vietnam War by Gregory Hamilton. The program that recruited men who would have been considered below the required mental conditions, IQ, or physical conditions, was a complete failure and created a dent in the US military history as one of the failures that will never be forgotten. These programs always create the quagmire for the question of where are we going to draw the lines? Is it ethical to send off people who cannot even process their emotional state? A large number of those recruited soldiers being sent off to the front of the trenches were treated as sacrificable persons, which shows us how far leaders are capable of tearing the standards and taking the matter at hand into a stage where the precedented circumstances are opaque, or maybe even beyond. We should learn from these mistakes and understand the difference between urgent measures for unprecedented times and unethical measures for exceptional times. As always, this is Hassan. Be good to yourselves, and I'll see you real soon.